His slap cracked through the mansion. Tia Murphy staggered, her bucket tipping over as soapy water spread across the white floor. No one moved to help her. Yoon Min Ho didn't even raise his voice. "Useless," he said, brushing his hand like he'd hit furniture. "You people only understand pain." The men around him laughed. Suits, watches, guns under jackets. Tia lowered her head, not in fear, in control. She had learned long ago that reacting too fast gets you killed. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quietly. Yoon smirked. "You'll work tonight. Important guests. Don't embarrass me." Then he turned his back on her. That was his mistake. Because Tia didn't need help. She didn't need mercy. And when the night ended, no one in that house would ever look down on her again. Before we continue, if you've ever been underestimated because of what you do or how you look, drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button for love and tension. You won't believe what Tia does next. Now, let's continue. The mansion sprawled across Gangnam's most exclusive hillside like a monument to blood money. Tia had learned quickly that Yoon Min Ho's wealth came from things polite society didn't discuss: smuggling, extortion, and the kind of violence that kept neighborhoods silent. She moved through the third-floor hallway with practiced efficiency, her cleaning cart squeaking softly. Every room told a story of excess: imported furniture from Italy, artwork stolen from private collections, and safes built into walls that held more cash than most families saw in lifetimes. Tia's reflection caught in a gilded mirror. 28 years old, skin dark as midnight, hair pulled back in a tight bun. The shapeless gray uniform hid her athletic frame, muscles earned from 15 years of secret training at her grandfather's dojo in Atlanta. He'd been a kung fu master who'd learned from a legendary Shaolin monk, and he'd seen something in young Tia that others missed: discipline, fire, and the patience to wait for the right moment. "You're still here?" Daejung, one of Yoon's enforcers, appeared in the doorway. He was younger than his boss, cocky, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "Party starts in 4 hours. Kitchen needs prep." "I'll be there," Tia said, not meeting his eyes, subservient, invisible. Daejung stepped closer, invading her space. "You know what happens at these parties: important men, politicians, business owners, other organizations." His hand reached for her arm. "A pretty thing like you might catch someone's eye, maybe make better money than scrubbing toilets." Tia's muscles coiled instinctively. She could break his wrist in 3 moves, collapse his knee with a low kick, but instead she stepped back, letting fear show on her face. "I just clean, sir." "Too bad," Daejung laughed, backing off. "You're too uptight anyway. Loosen up or you won't last here." He left, and Tia released a slow breath. Her hands weren't shaking from fear. They were steady as stone. She'd been in Seoul for 3 months, and every day she cataloged patterns, security rotations, blind spots in camera coverage, where Yoon kept his weapons, which men were dangerous versus which ones were just cruel. Tonight's party would bring them all together, and Tia needed one more piece of information. She pushed her cart toward Yoon's private office, the one room she was forbidden to enter. The door was locked, but Tia had watched him punch the code 17 times, 8274. His daughter's birthday, arrogant enough to use something memorable. The lock clicked. Tia slipped inside. The office reeked of expensive cologne and cigar smoke. She moved to his desk, rifling through papers with practiced speed. Shipping manifests from Busan, payment records to corrupt officials, photographs of people who'd crossed him, their faces beaten, broken. Then she found it, a ledger, handwritten, documenting every transaction, names, dates, amounts, evidence of a criminal empire. Footsteps in the hallway. Tia's heart rate didn't spike, her training kicked in. She photographed 3 pages with her phone, returned everything exactly as she'd found it, and slipped through the side door that led to the servants' staircase. She was back at her cart 30 seconds before Dae-jung rounded the corner. "Kitchen, now," he barked. "Yes, sir." Tia followed him downstairs, her mind already working 3 steps ahead. Tonight she'd serve drinks, stay invisible, and listen. Because in 2 weeks, when she had everything she needed, Yoon Min-ho and his entire organization were going to learn that the woman they'd dismissed as worthless was the most dangerous person in the room. The kitchen buzzed with controlled chaos. The head chef, a severe woman named Mrs. Back, directed her staff like a general commanding troops. Tia was assigned to the catering team, black vest, white shirt, invisible among a dozen other servers who spoke rapid Korean around her. "American girl," Mrs. Back said in broken English. "You carry tray, no speak to guests, no look at guests. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. These men," Mrs. Beck lowered her voice, "very dangerous. You stay quiet, you stay alive." Tia nodded, accepting the tray of champagne flutes. Through the kitchen's service window, she glimpsed the main hall transforming. Crystal chandeliers blazed. A string quartet tuned instruments. Men in expensive suits began arriving, their laughter sharp and predatory. And Yoon Min-ho stood at the center of it all, the king of his empire, greeting guests with practiced charm that hid the monster beneath. Tia's cheek still burned from his slap. Soon, she thought, very soon. The party swelled with Seoul's criminal elite. Tia moved through the crowd like a ghost, refilling glasses, clearing plates, absorbing conversations in Korean that her months here had made comprehensible. She heard discussions of territorial disputes, plans to expand operations into Japan, complaints about police crackdowns that were easily bought off. "The American Maid," someone said behind her. Tia turned. An older man in a gray suit studied her with unsettling intensity. His face was weathered, eyes calculating. "You're the one Min-ho slapped this afternoon." It wasn't a question. Tia kept her expression neutral. "An accident, sir. I was careless." "Careless?" The man smiled without warmth. "I'm Hwang Il-sung. I run operations in Busan. You know what I think?" Tia remained silent, waiting. "I think you're smarter than you pretend. The way you move," he gestured vaguely. "Military training?" Her blood ran cold, but her face stayed calm. "I was a janitor at a gym in Atlanta, sir. I watched people exercise." Hwang studied her for a long moment, then laughed. "Maybe, or maybe you're more interesting than you look." He leaned closer. "Be careful, American girl. Men like Min-ho, they don't forget disrespect. And that bucket you dropped, it looked almost deliberate." He walked away, leaving Tia's mind racing. Someone was paying attention. She needed to be more careful, or her entire plan would collapse before it began. The evening wore on. Around midnight, Yoon gathered his closest associates in the private lounge, 8 men who controlled different aspects of his empire. Tia was assigned to serve them, the only servant allowed in the room. "Gentlemen," Yoon raised his glass, "to expansion. The Yakuza thinks they can muscle into our territory. Next week, we send a message they won't forget." The men cheered. Tia memorized every face, every name mentioned. These were the architects of violence, and they spoke about murder like discussing stock portfolios. "Min-ho," Dae-jung said, nodding toward Tia. "Should she be hitting this?" Yoon glanced at her, dismissive. "She doesn't matter. She's furniture. Besides," his smile turned cruel, "if she ever spoke about what she heard, who would believe a maid?" The men laughed. Tia kept her face carefully blank, refilling glasses with mechanical precision. Inside, she cataloged everything: the Yakuza conflict, the timeline, the names of their Japanese contacts. When the meeting ended at 2 a.m., Tia retreated to the servants' quarters, a small room with 3 bunk beds she shared with other household staff. The other women were already asleep, exhausted from the endless demands of serving criminal royalty. Tia lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. Her phone was hidden in a false bottom of her cleaning supply box, its photos encrypted and backed up to a secure cloud. 2 more weeks. She needed 2 more weeks of evidence, then she could execute her plan. But Huang Il-sung's words haunted her. Someone was watching, and in this world, being noticed was the fastest way to disappear. 3 days after the party, the mansion's atmosphere shifted. Yoon had lost a shipment, $3 million worth of pharmaceutical-grade opioids, intercepted by police who weren't supposed to interfere. Someone had talked. Someone had betrayed him. Tia was mopping the 3rd floor when she heard the screams. She moved toward the sound instinctively, then stopped herself. Invisible. Stay invisible. But curiosity warred against caution. She edged closer to Yoon's office where the door stood partially open. Inside, a man was tied to a chair. Blood dripped from his broken nose. Yoon circled him like a predator, his knuckles already bruised from delivering blows. "Who did you tell, Tae-hyun? The police didn't just get lucky. Someone gave us our route." "I swear, boss, I don't—" The man's words cut off in a scream as Dae-jung pressed a lit cigarette to his neck. Tia's jaw clenched. She'd seen violence before. Atlanta wasn't gentle to poor black girls growing up, but this calculated cruelty made her blood boil. Still, she couldn't interfere. Not yet. She backed away silently, returning to her mopping. When Mrs. Beck found her 20 minutes later, the older woman's face was grim. "You saw nothing," Mrs. Beck said in Korean.
"I saw nothing," Tia agreed in the same language. Mrs. Beck's expression softened slightly. "Your Korean is getting better, but that makes you more dangerous to them. People who understand too much." She didn't finish the sentence. That night, Tia couldn't sleep. The man's screams echoed in her mind. She pulled out her phone, reviewing the evidence she'd collected. Photos, recorded conversations, names, dates. It was substantial, but was it enough? Would Korean authorities even care about an American maid's testimony against one of Seoul's most powerful criminals? Doubt crept in for the first time. Maybe she should just leave, go home to Atlanta, forget this place existed. Her mother's medical bills were mounting, but was revenge worth dying for? Then she remembered Yoon's hand cracking across her face, his laughter, his certainty that she was nothing. "No," Tia thought. "I'm not running." The next morning, everything escalated. Tia was cleaning the ground floor when raised voices erupted from the main hall. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. "You think I'm stupid?" Yoon's voice shook with rage. "You think I don't have eyes everywhere? Boss, please." It was Huang Il-sung, the man from the party. "I'm loyal. 20 years I've served your family. Then explain why the police knew our Busan route. Explain why my contacts in customs suddenly went silent. Explain why my $3 million is gone." A gunshot cracked through the mansion. Tia flinched, her body instinctively dropping into a defensive crouch. Silence followed, then the sound of something heavy hitting marble. Footsteps approached. She grabbed her mop, forcing her hands to move naturally across the floor as Dae-jung appeared. "Clean the hall," he ordered, his face expressionless. Blood on the tiles. Tia's stomach turned. "Yes, sir." She walked into the main hall where Huang Il-sung lay dead, a bullet hole in his forehead. His eyes stared at nothing. Yoon stood over him, gun still in hand, his expression blank. "Disloyalty," Yoon said to his assembled men, "is cancer. You cut it out before it spreads." His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Tia. "All of you remember this. I own you. Your lives, your families, everything. Cross me and you end up like Huang." Tia knelt beside the body, her hands steady as she began cleaning.
The smell of blood and gunpowder filled her nostrils. She'd seen death before. Her grandfather had passed in her arms. But this was different. This was murder, casual and public, and it changed everything, because Huang had suspected her. If Yoon ever reviewed their conversation from the party, if anyone else noticed what Huang had seen, Tia wouldn't get a trial or a warning. She'd just disappear. Her timeline had just collapsed. 2 weeks became 2 days, maybe less. That night, Tia made her decision. She couldn't wait for perfect evidence. She had enough to cause damage, and she had something more valuable, her skills. The kung fu training her grandfather had drilled into her since age 13, the discipline, the patience, and now, finally, the necessity. Tomorrow night, the mansion would be hosting another gathering, smaller, more intimate, Yoon's inner circle only, and Tia would make her move. But first, she needed to prepare. She slipped out after midnight, taking the servants' exit that led to the hillside behind the property. The night air was cool, filled with the distant sounds of Seoul's nightlife. Tia found a secluded clearing among the trees, far enough from the mansion's security cameras. Then she began to practice. Her body moved through forms she'd rehearsed thousands of times. Fluid strikes, defensive blocks, kicks that could shatter ribs. Her grandfather's voice echoed in memory. Kung Fu isn't about strength, Tia. It's about precision, timing, using your opponent's force against them. A small woman can defeat a large man if she's smart enough. Tia practiced for 2 hours, her movements flowing like water, violent as a storm. When she returned to her room, her muscles burned pleasantly, her mind clear. Tomorrow, Yoon Min Ho would learn that the woman he'd slapped, mocked, and dismissed was the worst mistake of his criminal life. The next day passed with agonizing slowness. Tia performed her duties mechanically, scrubbing floors, washing windows, preparing for the evening's gathering. But her mind worked constantly, planning, calculating, preparing for every possible scenario. The evening meeting would include 8 men, Yoon's most trusted lieutenants, the ones who controlled his empire's key operations. Security would be tight, but focused outward, watching for external threats. They wouldn't expect danger from within, from a maid. Tia had already identified the weak points. The servants' entrance had a blind spot between camera rotations. The kitchen's back door led to an alley, and the main electrical panel was in the basement, accessible through the servants' corridor. Cut the power at the right moment, and chaos would provide cover. But she couldn't just escape. She needed to send a message. She needed them to know that Tia Murphy wasn't prey. She was a predator who'd been watching, waiting, learning. At 6 p.m., the guests began arriving. Tia moved through her serving routine, bringing refreshments to the private lounge where the men gathered. The atmosphere was tense. Huang's execution had everyone paranoid, watching each other for signs of disloyalty. "The Japanese are getting bolder," Daejung reported. "3 of our clubs in Itaewon got hit last night. Minor damage, but it's a message." Yoon's jaw tightened. "Then we send our own message. Tomorrow we hit their operations in Gangnam. Hard. No survivors." The men murmured approval. Tia refilled glasses, her movements automatic while her mind raced. Tomorrow. If she didn't act tonight, more people would die. Innocents caught in gang warfare. Yoon snapped his fingers at her. "More ice." Tia bowed slightly, retreating to the kitchen. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with anticipation. The moment was approaching. She could feel it like electricity in the air before a storm. In the kitchen, Mrs. Beck was supervising the final preparations for dinner. "You look pale," the older woman said in Korean. "Are you sick?" "Just tired," Tia replied. "May I step outside for fresh air?" Mrs. Beck studied her, then nodded. 5 minutes, then they'll want the first course." Tia slipped out the back door into the cool evening. The alley was empty, shadows deep. She moved to the electrical panel she'd scouted weeks ago, hidden behind a dumpster. Not yet. But soon, she was turning to go back inside when she heard it, a soft scuff of shoe on concrete. Tia spun, instinct taking over. A man emerged from the shadows, not one of Yoon's crew. He was older, Asian but not Korean, with tattoos visible on his neck. Yakuza. "You work for Yoon?" he asked in accented English. Tia's body shifted automatically into a defensive stance. Then she caught herself, forcing her posture back to subservient. "I'm just a maid, sir. I don't know anything." The man smiled coldly. "That's what they all say. But you've been in that mansion for 3 months. You've seen things, heard things." He pulled a knife from his jacket. "My boss is very interested in information. You help us, we pay you. You refuse." The blade caught the light. Time slowed. Tia's training mapped the encounter in milliseconds. His weight favored his left leg. The knife grip was amateur. His stance left his ribs exposed. 1 strike to his wrist, disarm. 2 strikes to his knee and throat, incapacitate. 3 seconds total. But if she fought now, she'd reveal herself. The Yakuza would report back, Yoon would investigate, and her window of opportunity would close. "Please," Tia said, letting her voice shake. "I don't know anything. I just clean. Please don't hurt me." The man stepped closer, confident in her fear. "Then you're useless." He raised the knife. Tia moved. Her hand shot out, striking his wrist with precision that sent the knife clattering away. Before he could react, she stepped inside his guard, her palm driving into her solar plexus with controlled force. Air exploded from his lungs. She followed with a sweep to his legs, dropping him onto the concrete with a heavy thud. The entire exchange took 4 seconds. The Yakuza thug gasped on the ground, stunned. Tia stood over him, her expression cold. "Tell your boss Yoon's mansion isn't easy prey, and next time send better scouts." She turned and walked back into the kitchen, leaving him struggling to breathe in the alley. Her hands weren't shaking. Her heart rate was already returning to normal. The first move had been made. But now, everything was accelerated. Pause for a moment. When was the last time you saw someone completely underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Drop your story in the comments. And don't forget to like this video if you're rooting for Tia. Mrs. Beck stared at Tia when she re-entered the kitchen. "You were gone 7 minutes." "I apologize," Tia said, collecting the dinner trays. "I felt dizzy." The older woman's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Tia carried the food to the lounge, where the meeting had shifted to darker topics, discussions of torture methods, disposal sites, bribes needed to keep officials silent. Tia served each man with mechanical precision, her mind already executing the next phase of her plan. The Yakuza scout would report back within an hour. His organization would be confused, since when did Yoon have trained fighters working as maids? They might assume she was undercover law enforcement or a rival gang plant. Either way, the revelation would force action. The Yakuza would either attack the mansion or pull back to reassess. And Yoon would investigate every servant looking for the security breach. Tia had maybe 4 hours before suspicion landed on her. Time to move the timeline up dramatically. She returned to the kitchen and approached Mrs. Bake. "Ma'am, I'm feeling worse. May I be excused for the night?" Mrs. Bake hesitated, then nodded. "Go, I'll handle the rest." "Thank you." Tia bowed and headed toward the servants' quarters. But instead of going to her room, she slipped down the back staircase to the basement. The electrical panel was an old industrial model, not upgraded when Yoon renovated the mansion. Tia studied it, identifying the main power feeds. Cutting them would plunge the entire building into darkness, but only for 3 minutes before the backup generator kicked in. 3 minutes. It would have to be enough. She heard footsteps above, security making their rounds. Tia pressed herself into the shadows, waiting. The guard passed without noticing the basement access door slightly ajar. Tia moved back upstairs, taking the servants' corridor that led past the armory. Yoon kept weapons throughout the mansion, but the main cache was here.
pistols, rifles, and in the back, a locked case that held something interesting. Tia had seen it weeks ago while cleaning. Extendable steel batons, the kind police used for riot control. Non-lethal, but effective. The lock was electronic, requiring a key card. But Tia had photographed Dae-Young's card weeks ago and created a duplicate using equipment she'd smuggled into the mansion. She swiped it now, holding her breath. The lock clicked green. Tia grabbed 2 batons, testing their weight. Perfect balance, full extension to 24 inches. She collapsed them back to 6 inches and tucked them into the deep pockets of her cleaning apron. Now she was armed. Not with Yoon's guns. She wanted to send a specific message. She wanted them to know that their own tools, their own environment, had been used against them. Tia returned to her room, waiting. She'd positioned herself in the top bunk, dressed in black athletic clothes she'd kept hidden, no more maid uniform. Her hair was tied back tight. Her breathing was controlled, meditative. At 10 p.m., the mansion settled into its nighttime rhythm. Most of the men had left after the meeting, but Yoon and his 4 closest enforcers remained. Dae-Young, a massive thug named Ryo, a cold-eyed killer called Song-woo, and a former Special Forces operative known only as Ghost. These were the most dangerous men in the organization, the ones responsible for the worst atrocities. And tonight, they would learn that violence has consequences. Tia waited until midnight, then moved. She descended to the basement silently, every step calculated to avoid creaky boards. The electrical panel beckoned. She placed her hand on the main breaker, counting heartbeats. Then she flipped it. The mansion plunged into absolute darkness. Emergency lights would take 30 seconds to activate. The backup generator 3 minutes. In that gap lived opportunity. Tia moved through the blackness with confidence born from 3 months of memorizing every hallway, every turn. She heard shouts from Yoon's quarters on the 2nd floor, confusion, demands for security to check the perimeter. Tia reached the security office first. 2 guards sat inside, flashlights bobbing as they tried to restart the camera system. Tia entered silently, her baton extending with a metallic whisper. The first guard turned toward the sound. Tia's baton cracked across his temple with precise force, enough to knock him unconscious, not enough to kill. He dropped. The second guard reached for his pistol, but Tia was already inside his guard, her baton striking his wrist, then following up with a blow to his jaw. Both men lay unconscious within 5 seconds. Tia grabbed their radios, listening to the chatter. Yoon was in his master suite. Dae-Young was checking the ground floor. Ryo and Song-woo were securing the front entrance. Ghost was unaccounted for. That was the dangerous one. The emergency lights flickered on, casting red shadows. Tia moved toward the staircase, her footsteps soundless. She was done hiding, done being invisible. Tonight, they'd finally see her, but it would be the last thing some of them saw. Tia reached the 2nd floor landing just as Dae-Young appeared from below. He spotted her immediately, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to anger in rapid succession. "You?" he snarled, reaching for his gun. "What the hell are you?" Tia closed the distance before he could draw. Her baton swung in a tight arc, striking his wrist with a crack that echoed through the hallway. The gun clattered away. Dae-Young stumbled back, shock evident on his face. "You're just a maid," he said stupidly. "Wrong." Tia's voice was steel. "I'm the person you should have respected." She attacked in a flowing combination. Baton strike to his knee, dropping him to one leg, then a spinning back fist that connected with his jaw. Dae-Jung crashed into the wall, dazed. Tia didn't give him time to recover. She struck the nerve cluster in his shoulder, paralyzing his arm, then swept his remaining leg. He went down hard, groaning. Tia stood over him, breathing steady, adrenaline singing in her veins, but her mind crystal clear. "Where's Yoon?" she demanded. Dae-Jung spat blood.
You're dead. Ghost will what? The voice came from behind her. Tia spun. Ghost stood at the end of the hallway, his expression unreadable. He was smaller than the other enforcers, wiry, his movements suggesting lethal efficiency. Former Korean Special Forces, she remembered, trained in Hapkido and military combatives. This would be harder. Clever, Ghost said in English. Very clever. You're not a maid at all. Who sent you? CIA? Interpol? Nobody sent me, Tia said, her batons ready. This is personal. Ghost smiled coldly. Personal is the most dangerous kind. He moved without warning. His speed was shocking, a blur of motion that closed the 15-foot gap in a heartbeat. Tia barely blocked his first strike, a knife hand thrust aimed at her throat. She redirected it with her baton, but he was already transitioning, his legs sweeping low. Tia jumped, twisting in midair, her baton striking down at his exposed back. But Ghost rolled forward, avoiding the blow, coming up in a defensive stance. They circled each other in the red-lit hallway, two predators assessing. Ghost's eyes were cold, calculating. You have training, good training, but I've killed 50 men in combat. You're just playing warrior. I'm not playing, Tia said, and attacked. The fight that followed was brutal and technical. Ghost used Hapkido's joint locks and throws, trying to grapple and neutralize her weapons. Tia countered with Kung Fu's fluid strikes and defensive angles, using her batons to maintain distance and deliver precise blows. They traded attacks in a violent dance. Ghost's kick to her ribs, blocked but the force still staggering her back. Tia's baton to his shoulder, connecting solid, his grunt of pain satisfying. But Ghost was wearing her down. Each exchange left Tia slightly more winded, her blocks a fraction slower. He was stronger, more experienced in actual combat. Grandfather's voice in her mind. When facing a stronger opponent, Tia, don't meet force with force. Find the opportunity. One perfect strike is worth 100 angry ones. Tia shifted her strategy. She began giving ground, letting Ghost press his advantage. He grew more aggressive, sensing victory. His attacks came faster, harder, and sloppier. There, a split second where his front leg extended too far on a kick, his balance forward. Tia's baton cracked into his knee with every ounce of force she possessed. Something snapped with a sickening sound. Ghost's leg buckled. As he fell forward, Tia drove her other baton into his temple with controlled precision. Ghost crumpled, unconscious before he hit the floor. Tia stood over him, breathing hard, her ribs aching where his kick had connected, but she was still standing, still moving. 2 down. 3 to go. The backup generator roared to life, full power returning. Lights blazed. Somewhere below, Yoon was shouting orders. Tia had maybe 2 minutes before the remaining men organized a coordinated response. She moved toward Yoon's master suite, her purpose crystallizing. She wasn't here for a fight. She was here to deliver a message, to show them that treating people as worthless had consequences. The suite's door was locked. Tia didn't bother with subtlety. She kicked it hard near the handle, using technique her grandfather had taught her. The lock mechanism shattered, the door swinging open. Yoon stood in his bedroom, a pistol in his hand aimed at her. Behind him, the massive windows overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline. So, Yoon said, his voice surprisingly calm, the maid has teeth. You slapped me, Tia said, walking slowly, her batons extended. You called me pathetic. You thought I was nothing. You are nothing. Yoon's hand tensed on the trigger. I don't care what skills you have. A bullet ends everyone. Then shoot, because if you don't, I'm going to teach you what happens when you underestimate people. For a moment, genuine uncertainty crossed Yoon's face. He'd built an empire on violence, on being the most dangerous person in any room. But something in Tia's eyes, the absolute certainty, the lack of fear, made him hesitate. That hesitation cost him. Tia moved like lightning, her body dipping low as the gunshot rang out. The bullet passed over her shoulder, shattering a mirror behind her. She closed the final distance, her baton striking Yoon's wrist with bone-breaking force. The gun fell. Yoon stumbled back, clutching his injured wrist, shock and pain warring on his face. "You broke it. You broke my wrist." "And you broke my pride," Tia said. "But I'm rebuilding mine. You're going to prison." She heard running footsteps, Rio and Sangwoo finally arriving. Tia turned, positioning herself between them and Yoon. These were the last obstacles. Rio was massive, 6'4", and built like a wall. Sangwoo was leaner, but radiated cold menace, a killer who enjoyed his work. They flanked her, moving to surround. "Little Maid thinks she's Bruce Lee," Rio laughed. "I'm going to enjoy breaking you." "Talk less," Tia said. "Fight better." They rushed her simultaneously. Smart tactics. But Tia had been training for scenarios exactly like this since she was 13 years old. Multiple opponents, confined space, no backup. She dropped into a low stance, waiting. At the last second, she exploded forward, targeting Sangwoo, the more dangerous of the two. Her baton struck his floating ribs in a precision strike that cracked them, then flowed into an elbow to his jaw. Sangwoo crashed into the wall, gasping, but Rio had grabbed her from behind, his massive arms wrapping around her in a bear hug. Tia felt her ribs compress, air escaping her lungs. Panic threatened. Few people could break a hold from someone that strong. Grandfather. Size is strength, Tia, but strength has weaknesses. Joint manipulation doesn't care how big you are. Tia snapped her head backward, connecting with Rio's nose. His grip loosened fractionally. Enough. She drove her heel into his instep, then twisted her body with explosive force, her elbow jamming into his floating ribs in the same spot she'd hit Sangwoo. Rio grunted, his hold breaking. Tia spun free, her baton sweeping in a backhand that caught him across the temple. For a moment, the big man swayed. Then he toppled like a felled tree, unconscious before he hit the carpet. Sangwoo was recovering, reaching for a knife on his belt. Tia didn't give him the chance. She closed fast, her baton striking his wrist, then his collarbone, then finally a calculated blow to his temple. He joined Rio in unconsciousness. Tia stood in the wreckage of Yoon's bedroom, surrounded by his fallen enforcers, breathing hard but victorious. Yoon himself sat against the wall, cradling his broken wrist, all his arrogance gone. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm Tia Murphy," she said, "the woman you should have treated with respect." She pulled out her phone, holding it up so he could see the screen. "And I've documented everything. Your crimes, your operations, your victims. It's all uploaded to multiple secure locations. If anything happens to me, it all goes to the authorities, the press, everyone." Yoon's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Tia smiled without warmth. "Test me and find out." She heard sirens in the distance. Someone, probably a neighbor, had called the police about the gunshot. Perfect timing. Tia walked to the window, looking out at Seoul's vast cityscape. Behind her, Yoon groaned in pain. His empire was crumbling, his power broken by a woman he'd dismissed as worthless. "I'm leaving now," Tia said. "Don't follow me, don't look for me, because if you do, all that evidence gets released. Your operation dies, and you spend the rest of your life in prison." "Wait," Yoon said desperately. "We can make a deal, money, whatever you want. Just—" "I don't want your money," Tia interrupted. "I want you to remember this. Remember that every person you dismiss, every person you hurt, might be hiding something you can't see. Respect isn't given, it's earned. And you've earned nothing but what's coming to you." She turned and walked out, leaving Yoon Min Ho broken and defeated in his own bedroom. Tia moved through the mansion's corridors like smoke, evading the few remaining security guards who were still confused about what was happening. The sirens were getting closer. She had perhaps 3 minutes before police arrived, and while part of her wanted to wait and give a statement, instinct warned against it. Korean authorities and Yoon's organization had connections. Corrupt officials might bury her evidence, disappear her as a witness. No, she needed to execute the final phase of her plan from a position of safety. She reached the kitchen, grabbing her prepared go bag from its hiding spot in the cleaning supply closet. Inside, passport, cash, clothes, and most importantly, backup copies of her evidence on encrypted drives. She'd been planning this exit for weeks. Mrs. Back stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You did this." It wasn't a question. Tia nodded. "They deserved worse." "They did," Mrs. Back agreed quietly. "But you need to leave, now. The police will be here in 2 minutes and they'll detain everyone for questioning. Once Yoon makes his calls." "I know." Tia approached the older woman. "Thank you for not stopping me." Mrs. Back smiled sadly. "I've worked for monsters for 30 years. Someone needed to stop them." She pressed a folded paper into Tia's hand. "My sister's address in Busan, if you need somewhere safe to go." Tia's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "I won't forget this." "Go," Mrs. Bach said. "The back gate, through the garden. It's the only exit they haven't locked down yet." Tia ran. The garden was expansive, filled with ornamental trees and carefully maintained paths. She navigated by memory, her bag slung over her shoulder, her body aching from the fights, but her spirit soaring. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. The back gate loomed ahead, wrought iron and locked with a keypad. Tia entered the code she'd memorized months ago, another of Yoon's arrogant mistakes, using the same numbers for multiple access points. The gate clicked open. Freedom lay beyond. Tia stepped through into an alley that led down the hillside toward Gangnam's busy streets. She heard shouts behind her, guards finally realizing she'd escaped. But she had a head start, and in the maze of Seoul's streets, one woman could vanish easily. She ran for 15 minutes, using every evasion technique she knew, down alleys, through crowds, doubling back, changing directions. Finally, convinced she wasn't being followed, she flagged a taxi. "Incheon International Airport," she said in Korean. "Fast, please." The driver nodded, pulling into traffic. Tia watched Seoul's lights blur past, her mind already working through the next steps. The airport would be risky. Yoon's people might check there first, but she had alternative plans. She pulled out her phone, navigating to a secure email account she'd set up weeks ago. With careful fingers, she typed a message to 3 recipients: the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency, Korea's National Intelligence Service, and 2 investigative journalists known for exposing corruption. The subject line was simple: evidence of Yoon Min Ho's criminal organization. The body contained links to her encrypted files, passwords to access them, and a detailed summary of what they'd find: trafficking operations, murder, extortion, bribes to officials. Everything documented with photographs, recordings, dates, and names. Tia's finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once she sent this, Yoon's organization would be exposed. But she'd also paint a permanent target on her back. Some of those corrupt officials might come looking for revenge. She thought of her mother back in Atlanta, unaware of what her daughter had been doing in Seoul. She thought of the victims, people like Hwang Il-sung, killed for suspected disloyalty. She thought of Yoon's hand cracking across her face, his laughter, his absolute certainty that she was worthless. Tia pressed send. The message flew into the digital ether, unstoppable now. Within hours, every law enforcement agency in Korea would have access to evidence that could dismantle one of Seoul's most powerful criminal organizations. The taxi reached Incheon Airport. Tia paid in cash, then walked into the massive terminal building. Flights departed constantly: Tokyo, Bangkok, Singapore, back to America. She could go anywhere. But first, she needed to know her message had been received. She found a quiet corner near a coffee shop, opened her laptop, and monitored the news sites she'd bookmarked. 30 minutes passed, then 45, then it happened. A breaking news alert flashed across her screen. Major organized crime bust in Gangnam. Police raid mansion linked to underground operations. Tia clicked the article, reading rapidly. Police had arrived at Yoon's mansion to investigate a reported gunshot, only to find unconscious security personnel and evidence of a violent confrontation. Yoon Min-ho himself had been discovered with a broken wrist, demanding medical attention and legal representation. But the real story emerged when investigators found Tia's evidence: thumb drives she'd hidden in obvious places throughout the mansion before the confrontation, insurance in case her email didn't get through. The article mentioned extensive documentation and ongoing investigation into corruption allegations. Tia smiled. It was working. Her phone buzzed, a burner number she'd set up specifically for this purpose. A text message from an unknown sender. The information you provided is being reviewed. Stay safe. If you're willing to testify, we can offer protection. Detective Park, NIS. Testify. That would mean staying in Korea, entering witness protection, months of depositions and trials. It would mean giving up her anonymity, becoming a target. Or she could disappear, let the evidence speak for itself, and vanish into a new life somewhere far from here. Tia stared at the message for a long moment, weighing her options. Then she typed her response. "I'll consider it, but I need guarantees. Real protection, not promises. Contact me at this number in 24 hours with details." She hit send, then powered off the phone. 24 hours would give her time to get somewhere safe, to think clearly about her next move without the adrenaline and exhaustion clouding her judgment. A flight to Singapore was boarding in 40 minutes. Tia bought a ticket with cash, using a backup passport she'd acquired through less-than-legal channels during her months in Seoul. The name on it was Linda Chen, American expat, English teacher. She cleared security without incident, her real passport and identification hidden in a secure location she'd pre-arranged at a storage facility in Busan. If she needed her real identity back, she could retrieve it, but for now, Linda Chen would disappear into Southeast Asia's vast expat community. The plane lifted off just as the sun began rising over Seoul. Tia watched the city shrink below her, the sprawling metropolis that had held her captive, beaten her down, and ultimately witnessed her transformation from invisible Maid to something far more dangerous. But as the plane climbed higher, Tia felt something unexpected. Not triumph, but emptiness. She'd won. She'd exposed Yoon's organization, delivered justice, proven her strength. So why did it feel incomplete? Because revenge isn't the same as healing, she realized. I broke them, but I'm still broken too. The slap had been the trigger, but the real wound was deeper. Years of being underestimated, dismissed, treated as less than. Her grandfather's death, her mother's illness, and the desperate financial pressure that had driven Tia to Seoul in the first place. The cumulative weight of being a black woman in spaces that didn't value her existence. Defeating Yoon didn't erase any of that. It just proved she could survive it. The flight attendant offered beverages. Tia requested water, then settled into her seat, exhaustion finally catching up. She had 24 hours to decide whether to return and testify or to vanish completely. As she drifted toward sleep, her mind replayed the final moments in Yoon's bedroom, his broken wrist, his shattered arrogance, his desperate plea for a deal. She'd left him alive, broken but breathing. Some might call that mercy, but Tia knew better. She'd left him alive so he could watch his empire collapse, could feel the fear and powerlessness she'd felt. Death would have been quick. This was justice. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in 3 months, Tia Murphy slept without nightmares. 22 hours later, Tia sat in a small cafe in Singapore's Chinatown district, her laptop open to Korean news sites. The story had exploded. Yoon Min-ho Organization Exposed dominated headlines. Arrests were happening in waves, not just foot soldiers, but corrupt officials, business partners, everyone touched by Yoon's empire. The evidence she'd provided was described as comprehensive and damning by prosecutors. Photos from the mansion raid showed dozens of police officers carrying boxes of additional evidence. The Korean government was treating it as a major victory against organized crime, but there were complications. Several news articles mentioned an unidentified informant whose evidence had triggered the investigation. Some outlets speculated it was a rival gang or disgruntled insider. One particularly astute journalist suggested it might be someone with military or martial arts training based on the precise injuries inflicted on Yoon's security team. Tia's phone, the burner, buzzed. Detective Park's promised call. "Miss Murphy?" The voice was professional, careful. "I'm Detective Park Jin-woo with the National Intelligence Service. We've reviewed your evidence. It's exceptional work." "Thank you," Tia said neutrally. "We'd like you to return to Korea under protective custody. Your testimony could ensure maximum convictions, particularly for the corruption charges against government officials." "What kind of protection are we talking about?" "Full witness protection protocol, new identity, relocation anywhere you choose, financial support, 24-hour security until trials conclude." It was generous, more than Tia had expected, but something in Detective Park's tone made her pause. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked. A long silence. Then, "Yoon Min-ho is claiming you assaulted him and his employees without provocation. He's alleging you were working for a rival organization. His lawyers are building a case that paints him as the victim." Tia's jaw tightened. Of course, even broken and exposed, Yoon was still fighting. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "No," Detective Park said firmly. "Your evidence is too detailed, too carefully documented. This wasn't a hit job, it was justice. But his legal team is skilled, and without your testimony, they might create enough reasonable doubt to muddy the waters. What happens if I don't come back?" Another pause. "Convictions on the documentation crimes, probably. Money laundering, extortion, maybe some drug charges. But murder, corruption, without you testifying about what you witnessed, about Hwang Il-sung's execution and the other atrocities, those charges might not stick." Tia closed her eyes. This was the choice: safety or justice, her freedom or ensuring that Yoon truly paid for his crimes. "I need more time, 24 more hours. Miss Murphy, that's my offer. I'll call you back tomorrow, same time. Don't try to trace this number. Don't try to find me. If I sense any surveillance, I disappear permanently." "Understood," Detective Park said reluctantly. 24 hours, but please consider carefully. What you've already done is brave. Finishing it would be heroic." Tia ended the call. She spent the rest of the day walking Singapore's streets, thinking. Marina Bay's futuristic skyline, Little India's vibrant chaos, Gardens by the Bay's stunning biodiversity, a city that somehow balanced multiple cultures, languages, and identities into functioning harmony. Could she have that? Balance, peace, a life where she wasn't fighting or hiding? Evening fell. Tia found herself at the waterfront, watching cruise ships depart for destinations unknown. She thought about her mother in Atlanta, who believed Tia was teaching English in Seoul, sending money home every month. What would her mother say if she knew the truth? She'd say you did what you had to, Tia realized. She'd say you survived, like our family always has. But was survival enough? Or did she owe something more to Huang Il-sung, to the other victims, to everyone who'd suffered under Yoon's cruelty? Her phone rang again. Not Detective Park, a different number, Korean prefix. Hello? Tia answered cautiously. Ms. Murphy? It was Mrs. Beck, her voice strained. I'm sorry to call. I found this number in the kitchen, in your handwriting. What's wrong? They came for me. Yoon's lawyers. They're claiming I helped you, that I was part of some conspiracy. I've been suspended from my position, and they're threatening charges. Tia's stomach dropped. I'm so sorry. I never meant... Don't apologize, Mrs. Beck interrupted. What you did was right, but I wanted you to know. If you're thinking of disappearing, others will pay the price. Yoon's lawyers are building a narrative that everyone around you was complicit. They're going after the other household staff, trying to discredit the evidence by claiming widespread conspiracy. That's insane, Tia said. Those people had nothing to do with it. I know. You know. But will a court know? Without you there to testify, to explain how you worked alone, gathered evidence alone, acted alone, they can construct any story they want. After Mrs. Beck hung up, Tia sat in silence for a long time. The sun had set completely now, Singapore's lights reflecting off the water in brilliant colors. She'd been thinking of this as a binary choice, her safety versus completing her revenge against Yoon. But it wasn't that simple. Her actions had created ripples. Mrs. Beck and the other servants were now caught in the crossfire. Grandfather's voice one last time. Kung Fu isn't just about the fight, Tia. It's about the code. Protect the innocent. Stand against injustice. Accept the consequences of your choices. Tia had made her choice when she'd sent that evidence. Now she had to see it through, regardless of personal cost. She called Detective Park. He answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting by the phone. I'm coming back, but I have conditions. Name them. Full immunity for anyone connected to the household staff. They had nothing to do with my actions. Mrs. Beck especially. She needs protection too. Done. And I want something else. After the trials, after I've testified, I don't want witness protection. I want to testify publicly under my real name. I want everyone to know who exposed Yoon's organization. Detective Park hesitated. That's unprecedented and extremely dangerous. I don't care, Tia said. I'm done hiding. Yoon spent 3 months making me invisible. I want the world to see exactly who brought him down. If you do that, you'll never be truly safe. Yoon has connections beyond Korea. Even in prison, he could order... I know the risks, Tia interrupted, but I'm tired of letting fear control my choices. I faced Yoon and his men alone. I can face whatever comes next. A long pause. Then Detective Park said, You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both, Tia allowed. When do you need me back? There's a flight from Singapore to Seoul tomorrow morning. We'll have a security team waiting at Incheon. You'll never be out of protective custody until you're on the witness stand. I'll be on that flight, Tia confirmed. And, Detective, thank you for believing me. Thank you for being willing to finish this properly. See you tomorrow, Ms. Murphy. Tia ended the call and booked her ticket. Linda Chen would take one last flight, then disappear forever. Tia Murphy would return to Seoul and face the consequences of her choices. She spent her final evening in Singapore writing a long email to her mother, explaining everything. The job in Seoul, Yoon's organization, the violence and the evidence, and the choice to fight back. She scheduled it to send after her testimony concluded. Insurance, in case something went wrong. That night, Tia slept fitfully, dreams mixing with memories. Her grandfather teaching her forms in their small dojo, Yoon's hand cracking across her face, ghosts attacking in the red-lit hallway, Mrs. Beck pressing that address into her palm. When she woke before dawn, Tia felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Certainty. Not about the outcome, not about whether she'd survive this choice, but certainty that it was a right choice. The only choice that let her remain who she wanted to be. At the airport, she checked in as Linda Chen one final time. Security was routine. The gate was quiet. As she boarded, Tia noticed a man in a dark suit watching from near the windows, probably Detective Park's advance team, confirming her departure. The plane lifted off, carrying Tia back toward danger, toward truth, toward whatever ending awaited her in Seoul. She didn't know if she'd survive the testimony, if Yoon's reach extended even into protective custody, if the courts would truly deliver justice. But she knew she'd fought back. She knew she'd refused to stay invisible. She knew that when people looked back on the fall of Yoon Min-ho's criminal empire, they wouldn't remember a faceless informant. They'd remember Tia Murphy, the maid who'd been slapped, mocked, and dismissed, and who'd made them all pay. 3 months later, Tia sat in Seoul Central District Court, wearing a simple but professional suit. The courtroom was packed. Media, victims' families, curious citizens who'd followed the sensational case. Yoon Min-ho sat at the defense table, his wrist still in a brace, his expression carefully neutral. But when his eyes met Tia's, she saw something that satisfied her deeply: fear. The prosecutor approached her on the witness stand. "Miss Murphy, can you describe your employment with the defendant?" Tia spoke clearly, her voice carrying. "I was hired as a housemaid in March. I cleaned Mr. Yoon's mansion and served at his gatherings. And during your employment, what did you witness?" "Everything," Tia said, looking directly at Yoon. "His trafficking operations, the extortion, the violence. I witnessed him execute Wang Il-sung for suspected disloyalty. I overheard plans for territorial attacks against rival organizations. I documented it all." "Why?" the prosecutor asked. "Why did you take such risks?" Tia paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because Mr. Yoon slapped me. He called me pathetic. He treated me and everyone else who worked for him like we were worthless. And I realized that as long as people like him faced no consequences, they'd keep hurting others. Someone had to stop him. And the confrontation that night, when you," the prosecutor gestured vaguely, "subdued multiple trained security personnel?" "I defended myself," Tia said simply. "I have extensive martial arts training. When I realized my evidence might not be enough alone, I decided to ensure Mr. Yoon couldn't destroy it or harm me before authorities arrived." "Objection!" Yoon's lawyer stood. "The defendant was assaulted by the witness. This was vigilante violence, not self-defense." The judge looked at Tia. "Miss Murphy, did Mr. Yoon or his employees threaten you that evening?" "Mr. Yoon held a gun on me. He fired once. The bullet hole is still in his bedroom wall. I have photographs." The prosecutor displayed the evidence. The defense lawyer sat down, defeated. The testimony continued for hours. Tia described every crime she'd witnessed, provided context for the documentary evidence, and withstood brutal cross-examination from Yoon's legal team. They tried to paint her as a spy, a rival gang member, an unstable person seeking revenge. But her evidence was too solid, her testimony too detailed, and when she described Wang Il-sung's execution, the fear in his eyes, Yoon's cold calculation, the casual disposal of a human life, several jury members were visibly moved. At the end of the day, as Tia left the witness stand, she caught Mrs. Bayek's eye in the gallery. The older woman nodded, tears on her cheeks. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Yoon's organization was systematically dismantled through testimony from multiple witnesses. The corrupt officials were exposed. The money laundering networks were traced and shut down. On the final day, the judge delivered verdicts. Yoon Min-ho was found guilty on 43 charges, including murder, extortion, trafficking, and corruption. The sentence, life in prison without parole. As guards led Yoon away, he stopped beside Tia. "You destroyed my life." "No," Tia replied. "You destroyed your own life. I just made sure everyone saw what you really were." Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Tia gave a brief statement. "Justice isn't about revenge. It's about ensuring that power doesn't protect the guilty." Today, that justice was served. Detective Park appeared beside her. "Your protective detail will continue for 6 months, then we'll reassess threats." "Thank you," Tia said, "for everything." "What will you do now?" he asked. Tia smiled, looking out at Seoul's skyline. "I'm going home to Atlanta. My mother needs me. But after that," she shrugged, "maybe I'll teach kung fu. Show other women that they're stronger than anyone tells them, that being underestimated can be an advantage." "The world could use more teachers like you," Detective Park said. That evening, Tia boarded a flight to America. As the plane climbed through clouds, leaving Korea behind, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace, not happiness. The violence and fear had left scars that would take time to heal. Not satisfaction. Justice delivered didn't erase the trauma that had required it, but peace. The knowledge that she'd stood up, fought back, and refused to remain a victim. That she'd transformed pain into purpose and come out the other side intact. 3 months later, Tia Murphy opened a small martial arts studio in Atlanta's West End. The sign read, "Murphy's Defense Academy. Everyone has the right to feel safe." On the wall hung a photograph of her grandfather in his dojo, and beside it, a newspaper clipping from the Seoul trials. Reminders of where she'd been, what she'd survived, and why she taught. Her first student was a young black girl, 12 years old, who'd been bullied at school. The girl was quiet, scared, convinced she was weak. Tia recognized that feeling. She'd carried it for years before finding her strength. "What's your name?" Tia asked. "Maya," the girl whispered. "Well, Maya," Tia said, smiling, "let me show you something important. The people who hurt us think they're strong, but real strength isn't about size or fear. It's about discipline, patience, and knowing your own worth. Ready to learn?" Maya nodded, uncertain. "Good," Tia said, "because you're stronger than you know, and I'm going to prove it to you." As the lesson began, Tia thought about Yoon Min-ho sitting in his prison cell, his empire destroyed, his power broken by a woman he'd considered beneath notice. She'd made him pay, but more importantly, she'd reclaimed herself, and that, Tia realized, was the real victory. The end. Before you go, this story sparked something in you, didn't it? Maybe it reminded you of your own battles against people who underestimated you. Maybe it made you think about hidden strength and the power of refusing to stay silent. Drop a comment and tell me, what moment in this story hit you hardest? Was it when Tia first revealed her skills, or when she stood in that courtroom and refused to hide? And if you've ever been dismissed because of who you are or what you do, share your story below. Also, if you enjoyed this journey through Tia's transformation from invisible maid to unstoppable force, smash that like button and subscribe to Love and Tension for more stories about people who refuse to be broken. Which part of Tia's story resonated most with you?